Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Technical Tim here, and I want to thank everyone so much who's been liking all my videos and subscribing to the channel, and I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up or subscribe if you haven't already. And I'm streaming live, but I'm doing it private just because it's easier for me to upload videos this way, and I didn't feel like going live publicly on this video. But give me just a second. I want you guys to be able to see this a little better. Okay, that should be better. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do a quick video. The UFC 247 is coming up, and Jon Jones is. I see a lot of like narratives around him right now. Like you'll see a lot of people talking about how he's. Not everybody, but there is a pocket of people out there who talk about how he's overrated, and the big one is whether or not he's declined, and like whenever people say that, I just see things differently. I don't think he's declined personally, and I'm gonna kind of explain why. But the two main reasons people are kind of talking about why he's declined is because, one, he's not getting as many finishes anymore. So that's going to be the first thing that I kind of look at. Why isn't he getting finishes? And is finishing really, are finishes kind of like proof to whether or not you're dominant or whether or not you've declined? Some, things like that. I'm going to look at kind of like his finishes because people talk about how he doesn't have the killer instinct, stuff like that. So I'm going to first kind of analyze his finishes and kind of go through each fight quickly and talk about that. But then I'm going to get a lot more detailed on point two and kind of just look at his stats and kind of look at his recent fights kind of since that OSP fight, because that's really the fight where the narrative started, claiming he's declined and everyone's talking about, ever since USADA came, he doesn't look as good. So like we'll talk about that second. But first, let's go through the finishes of Jon Jones. And like you can see, ever since that OSP fight, Jon Jones, he knocked out, so he didn't get a finish against OSP, obviously. He knocked out Cormier, so that was a finish. He finished Gus, and then he had a decision against Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos, and also against Glover and DC as well, if you kind of include those two. He didn't get finishes there. So kind of like in his last 7 fights or so, he only has 2 finishes. And that's kind of like one of the main things people are talking about to why he's declined, about how he doesn't have a killer instinct. And one, I don't think finishes, personal opinion, you guys can argue this or kind of have your own opinion, but I don't think finishes are really necessarily a sign of dominance or a decline or lack of, or a lack of decline. But because I guess is what I'm trying to say is like a 50-44, like a lot of people were talking about Khabib's win over Al Iaquinta. Like, what's wrong with him? He looked human against Iaquinta, but he won 50-44. He won literally pretty much every second of that fight. Like, Al Iaquinta landed a right hand here and there. But I see that win almost being more impressive than just kind of like a first round rear naked choke. I really do, because it shows throughout a fight that Khabib or Jones, whoever it is, can kind of maintain composure throughout 15 to 25 minutes, depending if it's a title or non-title fight. But let's look at the finishes anyway. But I don't think finishes really matter that much. But let's look at the finishes and kind of see the trend of his finishes. So he didn't have... we'll kind of go through. He finished Jake O'Brien by a guillotine, and you're going to notice a trend. Almost every single one of Jones's finishes is on the mat. It's submission based or kind of ground and pound based on the mat. Pretty much all of them. There's 1 or 2 that's not, and that's really it. So that happened. Matt Hamill, he pretty much finished Matt Hamill, ground finish as well. Brandon Vera, he took him down, ground finish. Vladimir Matyushenko, he finished him on the mat as well. Ryan Bader, finished via guillotine. That was probably one of his most impressive, like, early day Jon Jones win, in my opinion. Shogun Rua, I can't remember totally. I think I know he kneed him. I think he was in the clinch. I think he clinched up at times. I can't remember everything. I think he had takedowns and stuff too, but it was kind of like a lot of the beatdown was stemmed from the mat as well. So I'll label that up pretty much as a ground finish. Rampage, ground finish, rear naked choke. Lyoto Machina, this was a standing guillotine, but kind of like grappling based. So not really it was kind of ground finish-esque too. Rashad Evans, a wrestler who he couldn't take down, and notice what I'm gonna, like, that's foreshadowing later. He won by a decision, pretty much in a way. Pretty much in this, he doubled Rashad up in the significant strikes, and that's kind of what he does to his later competition later, so keep that in mind. Vitor Belfort, key lock, he finished him on the mat. Chael Sonnen, TKO first round, finished him on the mat. And then we got into the Gustafsson range, and what you're going to notice here is he doesn't get as much finishes after kind of that string, like really after the Sonnen fight. And you're going to notice he gets a lot of decisions, but I think the reason he's getting a lot of decisions and not finishes is simply because he's having to strike with a lot of these guys, because a lot of these guys are harder to get down and hold down. Gustafsson has pretty decent wrestling overall. Like, I mean, you saw him stop most of Daniel Cormier's takedowns better than most people. Glover Teixeira can wrestle a little bit. Daniel Cormier, 2 fights, 1 was a finish, and that was the only standing finish of Jon Jones's career. So just realize that he generally finishes people on the mat, so it shouldn't be a big surprise that he's not getting finishes really anymore. But Glover, the 2 DC fights, one of them was a decision, and it's because he can't really dominate on the mat against DC, because DC's a good wrestler. OSP, he got some takedowns here, but generally he had a lot of this was on the feet as well, and OSP is, you know, can grapple a little bit. Gustafsson, he did finish. Anthony Smith, he couldn't always get takedowns here, and when he did, he still was in a dominant position and landing big bombs on Smith. It's just Smith was kind of turtled up. And then Thiago Santos. Santos is a historically tough guy to take down, and Santos is also underrated, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but you'll see, I think the reason he's not getting finishes here is because Jon Jones has never been a guy on the feet who finishes people. Like he fought Rashad back in 2012 and pretty much won in the same statistical manner, 105 significant strikes to 45, that he really does now. And he's actually surpassed that. He outstruck Glover 138 to 53, outstruck DC 92 to 58 and 95 to 58 in their 2 fights. He outstruck OSP 105 to 57. He was outstriking Gustafsson 59 to 22 in the 3rd round and then finished him. Anthony Smith, he outstruck 125 to 36. And then I'm going to get to the Santos fight, which was a much closer fight. But if you look, I don't see a decline. I just see of finishes or anything. I just think because it's harder to control some of these guys on the mat, Jones is fighting more stand-up based fights, so he's not getting as many finishes. That's my argument. I could be wrong. I'm going a little hot take in this video, but that's just what I see. I think, and even when he's not getting finishes, he's still pretty much dominating all these fighters except Thiago Santos, which we'll get to. So yeah, and one thing I do want to mention, Jon Jones, I tweeted out a couple days ago, him and Kamaru Usman are the only 2 fighters in UFC history with like 7 fights or something, and Jones is at 20, who's outstruck on the significant strikes every single one of his opponents and has won or tied the takedown battle in every fight as well. So no one has landed more takedowns in a single fight than Jon Jones going head to head, and no one's landed more significant strikes. And he's pretty much still kind of just dominating these guys on the strike count. So I don't I don't see a decline just because he's not getting finishes, and I still see pretty similar dominant wins than he used to when he couldn't get finishes. So that's kind of like my main thing. And then I want to talk about the Thiago Santos fight because that was his closest fight for sure. And it was a little bit of a weird fight. Santos obviously had some type of like lower extremity injury, but Thiago Santos is heavily underrated. And a thing I'm going to show you is Thiago's tough to take down, and Thiago Santos Thiago Santos lands 4.44 significant strikes per minute and absorbs only 2.19. So he's just a guy who pretty much doubles everyone up. And if you go through Santos' numbers, unless if he got finished quickly, like against Gegard Mousasi, he's outstruck everyone he's ever fought. Thiago Santos. So Jones still outstruck Thiago on the numbers, 59-43. So Jones actually accomplished something that no one else has done. So I don't think that fight was all that unimpressive, just because he still did something no one else really ever does. But I also think this fight, so Jon Jones landed 59 significant strikes and Thiago Santos landed 43. And if you know Jon Jones's numbers over a 5-round fight, that's very low volume for him. And it's less dominant than he usually is. But I think it's pretty clear, like if you watch that fight stylistically, and whenever I was watching the fight, and I had this thought even when I was watching it, then I went back and looked at the numbers, and it kind of just confirmed my points. But Thiago Santos landed 43 of 166 significant strikes, and of the 43, 27 of them were leg kicks. So this was really one of the first times Jones has fought someone who can leg kick consistently, and not only can he land the leg kicks, he can control range with it. And if you look in that fight, the leg kicks were landing consistently for the most part for Thiago Santos, and Jones wasn't able to get in his range where he could start hitting you and not get hit himself. Because Jones likes to kind of get, you kind of have the clinch, like a smaller range, and then you have like the mid-range and the very long range. Jones will kind of get in that mid-range, and what he does is he uses his kicks and his range to kind of just start picking you off and landing his shots, and he's very good at protecting his head and his body. And Jon Jones has I think it's like 66% or something striking defense, and he's even harder to hit to the head. So that's his game. He gets his striking game. He gets in that mid-range to where you can land leg kicks. So that's why other people who haven't been throwing leg kicks haven't exploited this, but Santos started landing it, and he was able to control the range. So anytime Jones couldn't just get there to that mid-range and start teeing off because he would eat leg kicks. And to kind of prove my point, Jon Jones threw 59 significant strikes, or threw 90 significant strikes and only landed 59. And if you look at Jon Jones against Anthony Smith and other fighters, he was on pace, or he attempted over 200 significant strikes. So clearly in a 5-round fight, Jones could not get in his range where he could start landing and not get hit himself. And so the only thing that I saw in this Santos fight is that the leg kicks were bothering Jones, and his own offensive striking was pretty much limited because of it. So I don't think it's a decline. I think it was just a stylistic thing. But the defense of Jones was actually completely on par to what he usually does. Like I said, his game is to get in that mid-range to where you can't hit his head or his body, but you can get to his legs, and that's what Santos did. And if you actually look at the rest of the defense, so Santos only landed 43 strikes, and 27 of them were leg kicks, so he barely landed to the body and the head. And look how much he missed to the head. Thiago Santos went 9 of 92 to the head. So Jones, defensively, that's what he does. He makes you miss to the head and body, and then he peppers you up. But the problem was, he still could make Thiago miss, but he was getting hit to the leg and not able to settle in on himself and start unloading his own strikes. I think that's what happened here. And so I don't think there's been a decline on Jon Jones. I think he's pretty much been very consistent, and he's consistently outstruck everyone he's ever fought, and he's never lost a takedown battle, and he doesn't get tired, and he's only been taken down like 1 or 2 times in the history of his career. So that is the way I see it, and I think Thiago Santos is just kind of underrated as a striker. It's hard to land on him, and he's just good. Like, he's a good striker, and I think Dominic Reyes, I'm not playing this fight, having said all that. I do think Dominic Reyes is pretty good from what I've seen, but I feel like leg kicks will have to be a very... He's not going to win on the ground, and he probably won't knock out Jon Jones. I mean, a knockout could always happen, but I doubt it, because Jones, A, has a good chin, and B, he doesn't get hit to the head much. And Dominic Reyes lost a head strike battle to Volkan Ozdemir. But the leg kicks will have to be a heavy part of Dominic Reyes' game, because if Jones is able to get to that mid-range without getting hit to the legs, and he's able to kind of start teeing off, which he wasn't able to against Santos, I think he's going to get ahead on the strike count pretty easily, actually. So, and I've never really seen Reyes. He throws leg kicks, but I haven't seen him throw it to control range. Like Volkan Ozdemir and others were able to get inside and at least kind of be able to touch him a little bit. So I expect Jon Jones to probably win on Saturday. I'm not going to play it though, but I definitely, like, one thing I'm confident in is I don't think he's declined at all. I think early in his career, he was getting a lot of finishes because he could just maul people on the mat, and those guys weren't as good of fighters back then. And now he's fighting a lot of guys who are A, better than his previous competition, and B, a lot of them have been good wrestlers who can kind of protect themselves on the mat. And Jon Jones has kind of just doubled them up on the strike total, which is generally what Jon Jones used to do back in the day when he couldn't dominate on the mat, like against Rashad Evans. So that's my video. Let me know what you think, if you agree or disagree with me. But that's kind of my opinion on Jones. So thanks so much, guys.